You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken Tech for your ears.
What if I told you that for the first time in the modern era, software stocks are trading at a massive discount to the broader market?
Yeah, it sounds completely absurd when you first say it out loud.
I mean, we are talking about trillions of dollars in value that has essentially just been wiped out. The untouchable golden child of the stock market is, suddenly looking incredibly fragile.
Right, because we are so conditioned to believe that the recurring revenue model of software is the ultimate money-making machine. It has zero marginal cost of replication and highly predictable cash flow.
Exactly. But the data we are looking at is just undeniable.
Yeah, the premium valuations that software companies have enjoyed for well over a decade are unraveling, and they are unraveling rapidly.
So we are skipping the pleasantries today because we have a massive mission. If you are a curious, time-poor professional trying to keep up with how business actually works now, we're going to unpack exactly why the fundamental rules of building a tech company are breaking down.
And we really need to look under the hood of this massive transition because what we are witnessing is not just a standard market fluctuation.
It's a structural break, right?
Spot on. Artificial intelligence is severing the historic link between headcount growth and revenue growth. And to understand the mechanics of why that matters, we have to look at how companies have bought software for the last 20 years.
Right, okay.
It has almost entirely been based on the per-seat model.
The classic software as a service playbook. You build a great tool, you sell it to a company, and as that company hires more humans, they are basically forced to buy more licenses.
Exactly. Every new employee needs an email address, a customer relationship management account, a design software login.
More seats equals more recurring revenue. It is a beautiful, predictable engine.
It was the entire foundation of those premium software valuations. Investors assumed that as the economy grew and companies hired more people, software revenue would, just automatically scale alongside it.
But what happens when you introduce artificial intelligence agents that do not just complement a human worker, but actually replace the need for that human seat altogether?
Well, the entire per-seat recurring revenue model starts to unwind. I mean, why would an enterprise pay for 1,000 software seats when they only have 50 humans managing a massive fleet of autonomous agents?
Right, because the bots obviously do not need their own premium login tiers.
Okay.
Okay, let us pull apart a real-world example, because the theory is one thing, but seeing it in practice is just wild.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the media and events company, Seistra.
Yeah, they went from over 20 full-time employees down to just 3 humans.
Just 3 humans. And those 3 humans are managing 20 autonomous agents. In the first 2 months of running this new multi-agent stack, they generated $1.5 million in revenue.
Wait, $1.5 million? In 2 months?
Yeah, and the company explicitly noted that the output actually increased because the agents were just more reliable. They do not suffer from administrative fatigue.
That is full on. But how does that actually work mechanically? I mean, are these agents just sophisticated chatbots?
No, that is the critical distinction here. They are not just chatbots waiting for a prompt. A multi-agent system involves different specialized AI agents actually talking to each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they orchestrate tasks without human intervention. So you might have one agent that constantly monitors inbound sponsorship emails. That agent parses the intent, extracts the budget, and then hands the data over to a negotiation agent.
So they are passing the baton.
Exactly. The negotiation agent drafts a proposal based on historical pricing and sends it to a scheduling agent, which books the meeting. The 3 humans are really just there to approve the final contracts.
I have to admit some genuine skepticism here, though. Are we really at the point where we are trusting bots to run core, complex business functions?
I completely understand the hesitation.
Like, a media company is one thing, but for heavy technical infrastructure, it feels like we are jumping the gun a bit.
Well, the telemetry data from Databricks suggests the transition is already happening at a massive scale. Databricks monitors over 20,000 organizations, including a huge chunk of the Fortune 500.
Okay, so they have visibility into what is actually being built.
Spot on. And their report shows that the deployment of these multi-agent systems grew by over 300% in under 4 months.
300% in 4 months. That is a literal hockey stick curve.
Yeah. And the truly staggering statistic from that same report directly addresses your skepticism about technical infrastructure. Over 80% of databases within their ecosystem are now being built by AI agents.
Hold on. 80%.
80%, not human database engineers, agents.
Are we talking about actual complex enterprise databases or just, basic data dumping scripts that someone slapped an AI label on to sound innovative?
No, we are talking about functional architectural builds. The mechanism here is that the AI is not just auto-completing code. It is reading the schema requirements, writing the SQL, testing the queries, identifying anomalies in the data relationships.
It is doing the heavy architectural lifting.
Precisely. So if you are a legacy software vendor selling a tool that helps human engineers manage databases, your total addressable market is shrinking at terrifying speeds.
Selling per-seat software right now is like trying to sell steering wheels to a fleet of self-driving cars. The fundamental architecture of the vehicle has changed, and you are just holding a component that nobody needs anymore.
That is a perfect analogy. The market is realizing that the old metric of counting human licenses is dead. And this raises an important question. If selling seats to humans is a dying business, how do you actually build a moat?
Right. If the per-seat model is out, we have to look at where the money is moving. We move from competing for the relatively tight IT budget to targeting a completely different, much larger pool of money.
Which brings us to the rise of vertical AI. Historically, vertical software companies that built tools for one specific industry, like dentistry or freight logistics, they hit a revenue ceiling pretty fast.
Because they were fighting for a tiny slice of a company's software budget.
Exactly. But vertical AI completely changes the return on investment calculation. Instead of competing for the software budget, these tools compete for the much larger labor budget.
Because they are actually doing the work, not just facilitating the work for a human. So instead of asking the IT department for $50,000 a year for a tracking tool, you are asking the operations director for $500,000.
Right, because your system is effectively doing the work of 10 junior analysts.
That is wild.
It is the exact shift in the economic model. But to truly build a moat and justify that kind of spend, these new companies have to change how corporate information is captured. Legacy enterprise software won by simply storing records.
It was essentially a glorified digital filing cabinet. It captured what was sold, what was shipped, what bug was resolved.
But it missed the why.
And the why is everything.
It really is. This is where we get into the concept of decision traces and context graphs. Capturing the reasoning behind a decision is incredibly hard for legacy software. But new AI systems operate directly inside the workflow. They read the Slack channels, they observe the email threads, they understand the friction, they log the structured reasoning, capturing the institutional knowledge as it happens.
It is the difference between reading the final score of a footy match the next day versus having a telepathic link to the coach's strategy while the game is actually being played.
I love that.
You do not just see that they kicked a goal. You understand the tactical adjustments, the field position, the actual reasoning that led to that specific play.
And that contextual reasoning is where the true enterprise value lies. Companies like Anthropic, for example, are focused on building enough trust to operate directly inside those workflows. Trust becomes the ultimate moat.
Because once an AI is trusted to execute a task and log all that intricate reasoning, it becomes the central nervous system of the company. It is almost impossible to rip out.
Exactly.
Which means building a traditional software business right now feels like an absolute trap. But hang on, this brings us to a really uncomfortable place.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
If agents are taking over the execution layer, and these new systems are logging all the reasoning and the why, what exactly are the human employees supposed to be doing?
That is the existential question for modern management right there. And it is incredibly instructive to look at the post-mortem of Convoy.
Right, Convoy. This was a multi-billion-dollar freight and logistics unicorn that just completely collapsed.
Yeah. And when the co-founder reflected on the failure, his biggest regret was not the product. And it was not the market fit or the macroeconomic conditions. The fatal flaw was the culture.
We hear the word culture thrown around so much, usually alongside ping pong tables and forced team bonding retreats. But they were talking about something much more structural, right?
They were talking about the operational philosophy of the wall knocker.
The wall knocker.
The concept is that 80% of your team should be people who show up every single day and just knock down obstacles. They bypass blocked procurement processes. They fix broken code. They remove friction.
And the other 20% of the company.
That is mostly administrative overhead, endless alignment meetings, and, middle management distraction.
I genuinely love the phrase wall knockers. It strips away all the corporate jargon. But I have to push back a little here.
Fair enough.
Is wall knocker just a polite Silicon Valley way of saying, We're going to overwork our engineers until they burn out because our processes are terrible.
Mm.
It sounds a bit like toxic hustle culture masquerading as efficiency.
That is a very fair critique, and if deployed poorly, it absolutely becomes toxic. But the true philosophy of a wall knocker is actually about empowering employees by removing the bureaucratic sludge that causes burnout in the first place.
So how do you actually build a team like that?
Well, you do not do it by asking them to work 80-hour weeks. You do it by killing the instruction manual. One of the biggest lessons from the Convoy collapse was that companies need to stop writing massive, complex process documents that nobody ever reads.
Oh, I have to laugh at the idea of banning corporate instruction manuals. It is so
Ah.
deeply relatable. Everyone has experienced the absolute frustration of searching through a company wiki, finding a 10-page document from 3 years ago, and realizing absolutely none of it applies to the software you are using today.
Those outdated wikis are a symptom of a much broader leadership trap. Leaders often try to mandate culture from the top down. They write grand mission statements and host values seminars, but you cannot force culture.
Right. The research outlines it as a flow from vibe to environment to culture.
Exactly. The initial vibe of the founding leadership shapes the environment. The environment is the actual processes, the layers of approval required, and the culture is just the organic output that naturally emerges from that environment.
Because apparently we have reached the point where we need sophisticated bots to handle our internal processes
Mm.
just so humans can spend their time actually solving problems instead of navigating red tape.
Yeah, but if you have an environment full of red tape and unread manuals, your culture will inevitably be sluggish, regardless of what your optimistic mission statement claims.
So if artificial intelligence removes that red tape by automating the processes, does it automatically fix the culture? Like, do you just drop an agent into the mix and suddenly everyone becomes an empowered wall knocker?
Not necessarily, and that brings us to a brilliant theoretical framework from Jack Dorsey about the tension between legibility and legitimacy.
Oh, this is fascinating.
AI is incredibly good at making complex systems legible. It monitors every digital interaction, processes data instantly, and makes the entire operation measurable to the algorithm.
But legibility is not the same as legitimacy.
Exactly the opposite in many cases. A highly legible AI-driven system might make a business vastly more efficient on paper, but it completely ignores the deeper philosophical questions of power dynamics and human agency.
Right. Is the algorithm's control actually viewed as legitimate by the workers?
Precisely. If you strip away middle management and replace them with cold algorithms that dictate tasks, you risk creating an environment where humans feel totally alienated, surveilled, and powerless. They will ultimately sabotage the system or just leave.
That is a pretty dark scenario. So before we assume AI will magically fix every sluggish company, we really need to look at what happens when you pour these autonomous agents into a fundamentally broken system.
Because it is definitely not a silver bullet. It is actually a dysfunction multiplier.
A dysfunction multiplier. I like that.
To understand this, we have to look at the concept of the demand mix. Most organizations never critically examine where their internal work actually comes from. If you have a broken product organization that treats the engineering team as a mere bottleneck.
And the whole culture revolves around product managers feeding engineers endless, poorly defined JIRA tickets to justify their own jobs.
Right. AI is not going to fix that underlying dynamic. It accelerates whatever dysfunctional dynamics already exist.
It is just going to generate those poorly defined JIRA tickets 10 times faster. You will have agents writing user stories for other agents to ignore.
Exactly. Your backlog will grow from a few hundred unmanageable tasks to tens of thousands in a matter of days. If your core processes are bad, AI will happily help you execute those bad processes at terrifying speeds.
So how do you avoid that trap? How do you actually use these powerful tools without just amplifying the corporate chaos?
You have to rigorously separate your daily work into two distinct buckets: execution and exploration.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Execution involves the repetitive, known processes: routing approvals, formatting reports, sending invoices. That is where you automate relentlessly with multi-agent systems. Let the bots handle the legible tasks.
In exploration.
Exploration is entirely different. That is dealing with ambiguity, high-level strategy, and novel problems. In exploration, you should never use AI as an answer machine to just spit out a final strategy.
Use it purely as a thought partner.
Exactly. To stress test your own ideas and find the blind spots in your logic.
That distinction is incredibly helpful. It pushes back on this immense, almost suffocating pressure to adopt every single new tool that launches on social media.
Oh, 100%.
If you strictly focus on automating your execution layer and only use AI to challenge your strategic exploration, you can safely ignore 90% of the shiny new apps flooding your feed. You do not need a new wrapper app for every minor task.
And maintaining a healthy skepticism about those shiny new apps is critical right now because the illusion of AI capability is very real and highly lucrative for bad actors.
Speaking of bad actors, we have to talk about the MEDV story. It is the ultimate cautionary tale of this era.
Yeah, the billion-dollar Rorschach test. For context, this was a multi-billion-dollar revenue company that was held up by the tech media as this shining beacon of AI success.
Right. The narrative was that they supposedly had just 2 human employees generating nearly $2 billion in revenue by using advanced AI to automate everything from patient acquisition to medical supply chains.
But when regulators actually looked under the hood, the sophisticated tech stack was not driving the success at all.
Not even a little bit.
No. The entire company was built on fabricated doctor profiles using generative imagery. They were ruthlessly exploiting telehealth deregulation, and their revenue was entirely driven by riding the massive consumer demand for GLP-1 weight loss drugs.
I still struggle to understand how that happens. How does a company generating that much revenue with all the venture capital scrutiny in the world get away with that? Do investors just completely fail to look under the hood?
It is because the market is so desperate for an AI miracle story that validates these massive valuations. People simply saw whatever they wanted to see.
So they ignored the glaring red flags.
Totally ignored them. It was not an AI company. It was a regulatory arbitrage company using artificial intelligence as camouflage to avoid scrutiny.
Which, yeah, is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Slapping an AI label on a regulatory loophole and calling it groundbreaking innovation.
It highlights a significant danger in the current ecosystem. The market can remain irrational, and optics can be easily manipulated by grifters. But even for legitimate founders doing the hard work, there is a massive new operational risk in how they build their companies.
Right, the whole build-in public philosophy.
Yeah.
For the last decade, the golden advice for startups was to share your journey on social media, publish your roadmaps openly, and build a community around your transparency.
But doing that now feels incredibly dangerous given how fast the technology moves. It is practically corporate suicide in some sectors.
Because your competitors are no longer just human analysts occasionally reading your blog updates.
Exactly. They have deployed AI agents that constantly monitor your public code repositories, your social media channels, and your product documentation.
Oh, wow.
If you announce a brilliant new feature, their agents can instantly write the code to clone it, integrate it into their platform, and launch it before you even have a chance to establish market share. The speed of algorithmic replication has fundamentally altered the risk profile of building anything in public.
So let us synthesize this wild journey we have just been on. We are watching the real-time structural unwinding of the per-seat software model. The traditional golden goose of tech is dying because you simply cannot sell a human license for a job that a multi-agent system is doing reliably for a fraction of the cost.
Spot on. And to survive that collapse, companies are pivoting heavily to vertical AI. They're targeting massive labor budgets instead of IT budgets.
And they're building their moats, not by just storing data, but by capturing the actual contextual reasoning behind complex business decisions.
All while trying to navigate the messy human reality that if you drop powerful AI into a broken bureaucratic culture, you do not get innovation. You just get automated, highly scaled dysfunction.
The ultimate goal is to build a culture of genuine wall knockers, eliminate the unread instruction manuals, and focus your human capital entirely on obstacle removal and complex, ambiguous exploration.
It completely redefines what it means to be a valuable employee and a resilient company in a post-software world. It shifts the premium from rote execution to strategic legitimacy.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to ponder as you go about your work. If your company deployed a fleet of AI agents tomorrow to seamlessly handle all the standard execution and routine processes, would your current daily output be considered the vital work of a highly valuable wall knocker? Or would you just be exposed as part of the legacy management layer that the algorithm is coming to replace? We will keep pulling apart these massive shifts and looking under the hood of where business is actually going on Vocal Technologist. Until next time, keep questioning the defaults and keep knocking down those walls. Cheers.
Spoken Tech, for your ears.